Hello everyone and welcome to our second webinar for the Queensland Architecture Awards. Today we'll be focusing on the do's and the don'ts of jury visits, and I'm joined by our 2018 Chair of Juries, John Thong, and the 2019 Chair of Juries, Paul Worroll. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Welcome.
So to provide a brief overview of the awards program, it is a nationally run program, and whilst we all run slightly differently, the main aim remains to develop a greater public awareness and understanding of the importance of architecture, and to encourage architects to strive for excellence in architecture and promote the advancement of the profession. The awards program is also one of our best forms of advocacy of good design, and the support of our members is very important. So in Queensland, we have a three-tier process. The first tier being the regional, which feeds into the second tier being the state, which then feeds into the third tier being national. At the regional level, all projects submitted are visited by our regional juries. These juries then form a shortlist for the state, which are made up of any regional commendations. The shortlist is typically announced in March. The regional juries also have the opportunity to highlight exceptional projects with the Regional Building of the Year and House of the Year.
So for all projects that are shortlisted at regional level, they are then considered for the state awards, and therefore they'll be subject to an additional site visit by the state jury. The results for the state jury or for the state awards are then announced at a dedicated event in June, and there will also be a state-based publication produced that will feature these projects. Any project at state level which receives an architecture award or a named award will then progress to the national awards program.
So for the national level, the national jury begin forming a list of projects to be visited once the chapter results are confirmed. This tour typically takes place between July and August each year. The annual national shortlist is then announced between August and September, and is followed then by the annual National Architecture Awards, which is typically held on the first Thursday of November each year. So moving on to our do's and don'ts for the Queensland entries. The first point is the coordination. So the chapter will advise a date and time for your visit at least 2 weeks prior to the visit taking place. The list of proposed dates for your region or category can be found on the awards website prior to the entries opening in November. It is important that you do consult those lists on the website to ensure you, your clients, and the project are all available on those applicable dates. And that you advise the Queensland Awards Coordinator immediately if you find any conflict with the dates proposed. As a side note, the jury visits are scheduled geographically, and often we don't have a lot of flexibility with the times given. We will, however, endeavour to accommodate any requests, and if that's not possible, we would look at potentially withdrawing the project. It is really important that you don't wait until you have that date and time. It's much easier to deal with special requests whilst we're planning instead of redoing the whole thing.
Planning the jury visits, we'd encourage you to give that a lot of thought and plan who the best representative is from the firm to meet the jury on site and take them through the tours. And also plan your visit and the tour throughout the project. Just from experience, I would encourage you to prepare your jury visit and just think about the best way to tour the project. You are the best people to know the ins and outs of the project and what the best route would be to show off the best aspects of your project. Planning the route, bear in mind the time of the route. The coordinator will outline the allocated time for the visit, so please pace yourself so that you can show all aspects of the project within the allotted time. And this is particularly relevant for the larger scale projects where there is often quite a lot to see and a lot to get through and for you to present to the juries. Arrange a suitable meeting spot to make the most of that time. Often that could be in the streetscape or a location that shows the external features of the building, and you can introduce the project and then progress further into the building as you go. I'd say don't start by asking the jury what they would like to say, what they would like to see. This is best left up to you because you know the project. Please think about how you want to present it and take them through the project in a way that you think displays and gives a clear impression of the project to the jury.
So when it gets to the actual site visit, it's important that, one, you arrive on time. It's also very important that you quickly define the scope of works to the jurors so that they understand the full scope of works of that project that you've entered. And maybe remind the jurors as well of the category or categories that you've entered the project in so that there's clarity around that. And ensure that all the jurors are clear on whether they can take photographs or if there are any other protocols or restrictions whilst on site, like taking your shoes off, wearing a hard hat, wearing boots, etc. So it's important to communicate that information. So as you walk around the site, it's very important that you actually talk and walk, particularly on the larger projects. You have a limited amount of time, and it's important that you don't have to rush at the end of the project when you're visiting. We strongly urge that you talk about core architectural ideas and concepts and how they were realised in the project. Focus very much on the positive experiences and aspects of the project. It's important that if you'd like to, you need to address the challenges, ensure they include, though, how these were overcome, and always remain positive.
Also talk about the memorable aspects of the project, either to you or to the client, and that gives the jury a feel of the impression of the project from a visitor's sense. Don't stand and talk. Paul's already mentioned about pacing yourself so that you talk as you progress through the project. If you stand in one location and describe the project, you will soon run out of time. Please don't cover the logistics or pragmatics or focus on the problems that have occurred through the project. Discuss the ideas, the architectural ideas and the intent that you've desired to put into the project. Avoid using procurement or cost restrictions as an excuse as to why things perhaps didn't turn out the way they should have. And similarly, logistical challenges, which we all confront on pretty much most projects. Discuss these challenges, however, perhaps explain how they were overcome through your design.
So if you're fortunate enough to actually do a jury visit and your client or your user group wants to be party to that, there are some important things to remember about that, and probably the most important thing to start with is to brief them on the process of what a jury visit is. So involving enthusiastic clients with positive experiences is a very advantageous position to be in. And it's important to let them share the project and their feedback. However, just be mindful of the time that you have and that they don't take over. Also, prepare the client for the reason for the visit and make them aware of what the actual jury visit is for. Because very often or not, they can be sidetracked to talk about things that may not necessarily be relevant. And just be careful and give them a cue or a time limit for their feedback. But we do strongly encourage that you actually have your clients and user groups present if possible. Quite important that you don't let your client talk for the entire tour. The architect is the person who should take control and convene and lead the discussions and the tours. Sometimes the client seems to know more about the project than the architect, and this can make for a bit of an awkward scenario. So again, just be careful that the client doesn't take over. There are a couple of other categories that are considered at state level that aren't considered at regional level, and they are the Sustainable Architecture Award and the ColourBond Blue Scope Award. These two categories are only considered by the state jury, and every project that is shortlisted and reaches state level reaches a state award or the shortlisting is considered for these categories. So we'll just briefly describe some of the things that should be thought about in terms of these two categories. So in terms of sustainable architecture, Australia has many great architects who've shown or have been leaders in designing responsive, responsible and delightful works of architecture that do more with less. It's also clear to remember that we should be leaders in sustainability. The sustainable architecture category is intended to support, encourage and celebrate this significant contribution. Many projects engage on a technical level in regards to performance aspects of the building, and they're measured through rating tools. And the aim of the sustainable architecture category is to recognise these projects, to recognise architects who've gone the extra mile, been creative and applied some intelligent thinking into how they achieve a sustainable piece of architecture holistically. Category aims to recognise integrated design thinking. So keep in mind that it could be a collaborative approach with your consultants and your client. There's also the broader ecological context to keep in mind. There are social aspects to do with sustainability that might also need to be discussed or mentioned. The entry requirements for this category are deliberately open-ended, but we should point out that there is a checklist online that can be used that will help the jurors as well as the entrants to consider sustainable and sustaining architecture. So we would strongly recommend that you go and find that document and use it if you feel like your project should be considered for the Sustainable Architecture Award. There are guideline and regulatory issues, siting and urban issues, energy efficiency and consumption, selection of building materials and process, protection of land and ecological systems, and social issues, as I mentioned before. You may not deal with all these topics or headings, but this is just a checklist or a guide to how you might approach or discuss your project. The jury may also call on specialist advisors in the judging of this category, but that will be considered by the state jury.
The ColourBond Blue Scope category recognises buildings and projects in which steel products play the significant role in the architecture and also exemplify innovation in the use of the steel and how that is worked into the projects. This category is also only assessed at state level, and the selection process includes consultation with the Blue Scope representatives at both chapter state level and also at national level. This award is not provided at a regional level. Please also note that there's compulsory information that's provided as part of your entry. You may have already done so, in that evidence needs to ensure Blue Scope products have been used as part of the submission process. Finally, just in summary, be prepared. Plan your route and trip with the jurors, and be clear and concise how you present the project to them. And enjoy the journey most of all.
And I think the other thing that we would like you to consider is that whilst this is a guide to jury visits for entrants, it's also maybe an opportunity for you to consider becoming a juror in the future. You get the opportunity to travel your region, to get to know your region better, to get to know your architectural members in the region better. It gives you maybe behind the scenes access, areas that wouldn't normally be accessible on a day-to-day basis. And also, in the long term, it helps to boost your CPD points. So we would encourage entrants in the future, if they are enthusiastic enough, to also become a juror. Thank you.
I think in becoming a juror, you will also experience it from the other side, so that you'll be able to see and learn when people present to you and you listen to them and how they explain buildings. It better informs you for the next time around that you have a project in the awards. Thank you.
That's now the end of our second webinar. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank both Paul and John for their efforts in pulling this series together. Of course, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to contact the Queensland chapter on 38284106. We are more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Now we can talk.
Yes. Can't hold my breath any longer.